Hi, I'm Dr. Rebecca Kinsey. I did a positive psychology workshop in February of 2026 and wanted to put this on YouTube in case this would be of interest to people. I'll be covering some easy tips to implement within your daily life to help improve your well-being. So this is a standalone workshop, so to speak, but it's also an introduction to a deeper 4-week series that I'll be doing in March into the first week of April. And in that 4-week workshop, I'll be talking about more skills to help improve well-being. So if that's something that you're interested in after hearing about this, I'll share more about that workshop at the end. So for today, we'll learn about what positive psychology is. I'll go over some principles to support well-being, and then you'll also get an opportunity to practice some skills towards the second part of this talk. And so my hope is that this information and practice will help you build psychological flexibility and resilience. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But to get you all to reflect upon this, when you are feeling good, life is feeling like it's going well for you, what is going on? Or to think about this in a different way, what are your ingredients, so to speak, to a good and meaningful life? So you can pause, you can reflect, and then whenever you're ready, you can restart and I'll continue. So I want to clearly state that positive psychology is not this toxic positivity where it's trying to ignore the painful parts of life or always trying to find the silver lining without recognizing there's been some sort of storm. Life can be very challenging, and we can acknowledge that while also orienting to the positives of life. So we're not trying to ignore human pain or suffering. We're not trying to be positive about everything all the time. We're just simply trying to learn how to orient to the positive. So from a research perspective, positive psychology is the study of positive human functioning. And researchers are interested in what helps people function well and perceive their life as satisfying and meaningful. And that's quite different from the disease model, in which researchers may look at what's causing dysfunction and then how we can fix it. So there's some really solid research into what I'll be talking about today, but I want to emphasize that some of the principles we'll talk about complement what you might already be doing for stress and mood management. They do not replace them, nor is there necessarily some principles that are better than others. We are just simply trying to add tools to the toolbox. And like I said, the goal of this is to help increase your psychological flexibility. Your psychological flexibility is your ability to adapt to circumstances based on what you know and what resources you have. I also hope to help with dialecticism, and this is being able to hold two seemingly opposite beliefs true. So for example, life can be painful and there can be joy and meaningful experiences too. And then lastly, I hope to increase some resilience. This is our ability to bounce back from challenges. And when we have more resources, it allows us to recover quicker and easier. So why is it important to focus on the positive? Our brain has something called a negativity bias. You can think about your last performance review, maybe tests you had to take, or difficult conversation you had. And then reflect upon the part that sticks out the most. Is it the positive or is it the negative? So for most people, it's going to be the negative, and that is not a personality flaw. That is just simply how the brain works. And then we can also relate this to rumination. When people ruminate, it's about negative things, not positive things. So in other words, our default setting is to focus on the negative and scan for threats. That negativity bias is adaptive. It helps to ensure your safety, yet it's really demanding on the nervous system, especially when it gets activated over something that is not life-threatening. So if you think about a difficult conversation, that conversation is not life-threatening. You're not about to die, but your nervous system reacts in a very similar way where it's activating that stress response. The other downside to this negativity bias is that negative emotions tend to narrow our focus. So if we're in a bad mood or we're feeling stressed, it changes the way that we perceive things, and we're more likely to perceive things as negative. With all of that being said, we are not trying to build a positivity bias, because the downside would be that we would miss threats. But if we're too focused on the negative, we'll miss the positives. If we're too focused on the positives, we'll miss the negative. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is build a balance between the positive and the negative. If we don't try to intentionally challenge that negativity bias, the brain is going to run wild with the negative. And we can actually train our brain to attend to the positive. And I'll come back to that later. All right, so what builds well-being? There is a model by Martin Seligman, who is a psychologist who's done a lot of research within positive psychology. And he has coined the PERMA model to describe those components of well-being. So these are the things that help people feel satisfied and fulfilled. So that question that I asked you at the very beginning has to do with what are your building blocks for improving your well-being, and then we can see how that relates to what the research says. So the first P in this is positive emotion. So these would be things like joy, excitement, pride, contentment, feeling peaceful, feeling thankful. And then we have engagement. So these are doing things mindfully, things that you feel competent to do, and you feel like that thing that you're doing matters in some way. Engagement in activities can lead to a flow state where you lose track of time and are fully immersed in this experience that feels good for you. And these are activities that have a balance of something that challenges you, but you also have the sense that you can do it. Like you have the skill to actually do whatever activity. So, for example, a thing that might put me into flow is doing Legos. It's challenging enough, but it's not too difficult where I feel like I can't do it and I can just lose track of time, and it's an enjoyable experience. Then we have relationships. And, for a lot of people, relationships can be a source of stress, a source of pain, but they can also be so incredibly important for building a satisfying and fulfilling life. And we know from tons of research that adequate social support is key for helping people function well. The M has to do with meaning, and this is doing things that are purposeful and impactful. We can create purpose by being intentional about living out our values. We can have an impact by recognizing how what we do, directly or indirectly, has an impact on others, big or small. So for example, I might get a sense of meaning from my work because I feel like what I'm doing as a psychologist can have a positive impact on those I work with and aligns with my value of being helpful. And then lastly is accomplishment. This has to do with achieving things, doing things successfully, and feeling like you are competent enough to master something. The pursuit of accomplishment is for its own sake. It's more focused on the process of pursuing an accomplishment rather than doing something for the hopes of getting rewarded or praised in some way, or doing something because someone else is expecting you or pressuring you to do it. So at the time of this recording, the Olympics are wrapping up, and in a lot of these interviews with Olympians, the medalists will talk about their dream of accomplishing, a really good routine, or winning gold, something, but they're doing it for their own sake. It's not that they're not getting praise from others, but many of them talk about it in a way that they're pursuing that flawless routine or getting a medal because they've worked really hard in their craft, and that feels like an accomplishment. So you can do a little self-assessment here and think about, on a 0 to 10 scale, where 10 would be where like 100% hitting the mark, 0, you're really lacking. Where do you think you are? And to deepen this understanding, reflect upon what are you doing that makes you evaluate yourself at an 8? And what would you be doing if you were at a 10? And there's no right or wrong answer. There's no judgment. It's just being curious. But this can give you a guide of where you can begin to put your energy. If you're at a 2 on positive emotions, that's a good indication of, okay, let's try to find some things that help you increase your positive emotions. So you can pause to think about that, and then we'll start again. So before we move on to the next slide, I did want to share some information from the University of Pennsylvania that has done a lot of research within positive psychology, and they have a wonderful part of their website that talks about the research with positive psychology and specifically well-being. I'm not going to read all of these line by line. I at least wanted to share it to provide this representation of why we care about looking at well-being. So when people have higher levels of well-being, they tend to have better relationships. They tend to perform better at work. In general, they tend to feel healthier. And these are things that are important. So that's why there's been more and more research happening within the field of positive psychology and well-being specifically. All right, so I just mentioned that the first component of well-being is positive emotions. So on this page, I have a little sliver of the feelings wheel. Focus on those emotions associated with happy. So looking at this list of happy emotions, I want you to reflect upon when was the last time you were feeling that way. So for example, there's a lot of different feeling words for happy here, but when was the last time that you were feeling joyful? When was the last time you were feeling peaceful or feeling playful? Or you can just use that broad term of happy. So think about, what were you doing? Was the thing that you were doing connecting with your values in any way? Or was the thing that you were doing that elicited this emotion with anyone else? And who does that person mean to you? So by reflecting upon this, you're already beginning to understand what helps you feel more positive emotions. Then you can start to intentionally do those things to help you feel that way again. What I mean by that is, if you know you felt really playful when you were out in the snow playing with your kids, the next time that it snows and your kids are at home, you might go in there with the intention of, oh, you know what, I could feel playful right now. Let me go play out in the snow with my kids. So we're just trying to increase that intentionality in order to yield the outcome of experiencing a positive emotion. So there is a lot of benefit to experiencing positive emotions, and one of my favorite theories is the broaden and build theory of positive emotions. This has been studied pretty extensively, and I'll share a couple of Fredrickson's studies, and Fredrickson is just the person who developed the broaden and build theory of positive emotions. So this first study I'll talk about is a pretty simple study. The researcher, so Fredrickson, had people watch one of 5 clips that elicited either joy, contentment, a neutral feeling, fear, or anger. Then she asked people to write down all the things they wanted to do that day. Participants who were shown the video that elicited joy and contentment listed significantly more things they wanted to do that day compared to those who saw the fear-inducing or the anger-inducing video. This speaks to what I mentioned earlier about negative emotions really narrowing our focus. Because of this study I just discussed, along with lots of other studies, Fredrickson coined this broaden and build theory of positive emotions. And what this says is, when we feel positive, when we feel positive emotions, I should clarify, our minds open up. We tend to think more flexibly, more creatively, and we see more options. We're also open to trying new things. And when our minds broaden in this way, we can then build more resources. So that sort of building of resources helps us reach out to others. It helps us find and utilize more coping skills, and it can increase our sense of self-efficacy or confidence. When we experience negative emotions, it has an impact on our bodies. And this has been measured through something called heart rate variability, which is a measure of how much your heart rate fluctuates. And if you have a smartwatch, sometimes on these smartwatches now, they have HRV that you measure. And so you might see this already. And this sounds counterintuitive, perhaps, but when you are relaxed, you have higher heart rate variability. And when you are stressed, you tend to have lower heart rate variability. So you can actually try this now if you're comfortable. So you can first take just a couple of big deep breaths. It's a nice diaphragmatic breath where you're breathing in through your nose, you're expanding it down into your belly, and then you're breathing out through your nose. You're breathing out through your mouth. So again, big breath in through your nose, letting it expand into your belly, and then slow breath out through your mouth. And then if you're comfortable, I invite you to take your pulse. So find your pulse. I like to just find that spot on my neck. And as you breathe in through your nose, Notice that your heart rate increases. And then as you breathe out, you'll notice that your heart rate actually decreases. So again, as you breathe in, you'll notice that your heart rate increases. And then as you breathe out, that heart rate slows. So this is heart rate variability. Anyways, so Fredrickson and other researchers have found that when people experience positive emotions, it helps to undo the effects of negative emotions. So think that the negative emotions dirties things up, the positive emotions cleans things out. So there's a study where Fredrickson colleagues measured cardiovascular recovery, so you can do this through heart rate variability as well, and found that people who watched film clips that elicited amusement and contentment had quicker cardiovascular recovery compared to participants who watched neutral or sad films. So the takeaway from all this is that negative emotions have an impact on our bodies. That's okay. It's just a part of the human experience. That's going to happen. Yet, to help us feel regulated, we want to be intentional about experiencing positive emotions and seeking out experiences that are going to elicit these positive emotions. Like I was saying earlier, that sense of intentionality can be really helpful. So if you've reflected upon times in which you felt one of these positive emotions, you can then start to have some awareness and you can build upon that. So, you just might have experienced a sense of peace by doing some deep breathing. Okay, well, that gives you an indication of you can do some deep breathing to elicit that same feeling of peace. Or maybe you were sitting on the couch with your pet and you just had this sense of being content. Okay, you can now go into that activity with the intention of, I want to feel content. Let me, go grab my cute little dog or cute little cat and, just pet them for a little bit. So that's the takeaway from why it's important to focus on positive emotions. So an easy, well-researched way to increase positive emotions is through gratitude interventions. So you might have heard the intervention of just write down 3 good things. And this is a classic intervention that is sort of like a quick and easy sell for people. And that's great to a certain degree. But unfortunately, that quick soundbite of just write down 3 good things is oversimplified. So it is not that writing down 3 good things is ineffective. It's just that when you do that, the benefits are not going to be as strong as they would be if you do something more specific. And I'll talk about that in just a sec. So some caveats to getting the most out of gratitude interventions is that writing it down tends to be better than simply thinking about what you're grateful for. So I encourage that. It is also important to reflect upon why the thing you're grateful for happened. So in the next couple of slides, I'll give you some prompts for gratitude interventions that hit on this. And then the other piece is important to reflect upon why you are grateful. So again, one of the exercises I'll give you has this information. So I'll go ahead and put the gratitude exercise on the screen, and then obviously you can just pause it so you can write it down. And then I have the link of where this came from. Dr. Joel Wong over at IU has been a really prolific researcher in gratitude. So he has an entire website dedicated to it, and it's awesome. So here's the first one. So write down 1 to 3 things, events, people you were grateful for or grateful to, and why you're grateful. So my example is, I'm grateful that you all are, listening to this presentation, because it helps me feel like sharing my knowledge can have a positive impact on people. So go ahead and pause, do the exercise, and we'll come back. All right, so this second exercise has to do with why the grateful thing happened. So I'll put these all up for you. And you can read the instructions there. Obviously, feel free to pause, take some time to do this. And then we'll go on to the next one. So this last one is a bit more relational. I want you to write a brief gratitude note to someone who has benefited you recently. And this goes beyond just a simple thank you, or we want to really deepen that sense of gratitude. And there's 3 things that are helpful when thinking about gratitude towards another person. That's the attitude of the benefactor, the benefit you received, and then the cost incurred by the benefactor. So for example, I'm so grateful that you reviewed my resume. I know that it took time and energy. You could have put that elsewhere. We're acknowledging the cost. So it means a lot that you helped me. It made me feel so much more confident applying for the job. We're talking about the benefit. And then maybe if the person who reviewed your job was really enthusiastic, was like eager to help, you could say like, I noticed you were so eager to help. You were so enthusiastic. And then we're talking about that attitude piece as well. So you can pause, you can practice this. So I just want you to take, some time to reflect upon these exercises. Specifically, was one of the exercises easier or harder than the others? Or did you feel like you liked or benefited more from one exercise over the other? I also just want to give the caveat that sometimes something new can feel uncomfortable or fake. And that's just our body's response to getting outside its comfort zone. Because it likes familiarity, whenever you do something different, it's like, this feels uncomfortable, or this just like feels really inauthentic. But as you continue to practice these exercises, you can try to see if it comes easier or if it becomes a bit more natural. The reason why I like talking about gratitude is that gratitude is easily manipulated by interventions, meaning the interventions that we know about are going to increase gratitude. We see this in studies over and over and over again. However, that increase in the felt sense of gratitude is temporary. So if you do the 3 good things exercise, you might feel good for a little bit, but it's not like you're going to feel good for the rest of the day or the rest of the week. So I had mentioned that it's really important to reflect upon why you were grateful for said thing or why the grateful event happened. The reason why this is so important is because when we reflect upon why we are grateful for something, it helps to enhance the experience. And the more we deeply think about something, the bigger impact it'll have. Interestingly, if people practice gratitude often, so they do these exercises consistently, they can develop a grateful life orientation. So this would be someone who is more oriented to the aspects of life for which they can have gratitude. So just like having a negativity bias, we can actually build a gratitude bias. As a reminder, having gratitude doesn't mean that you can't have space for feeling upset or grief or frustrated. It just means that you have tools to not linger in those emotions too long. Part of the reason why I like to do some sort of gratitude expression to another person is that expressing gratitude can have a pro-social effect. So it helps us feel more empathic, more forgiving, be more helpful. And gratitude has also been researched with couples, such that expressing gratitude to your partner can help with relationship satisfaction and to help you feel more connected. And then, as I mentioned in the beginning of the talk, in the PERMA model, relationships can enhance well-being. So if you can figure out ways to have more satisfying relationships, which can come through expressing gratitude towards those that you care about, it might have this ripple effect on your overall well-being. So I mentioned the negativity bias earlier. Our attunement to positive emotions and intentionally doing things to increase positive emotions, such as gratitude interventions, can be helpful for challenging the negativity bias. But I also wanted to cover another exercise to challenge that negativity bias, which is called the HEAL Protocol by Rick Hanson. Rick Hanson is a psychologist. He's written a bunch of books on well-being, and he came up with this idea of the HEAL Protocol. So first, we want to attune to positive or beneficial experiences. So noting times where you felt calm or grateful or joyful. Then you want to enrich it by noticing how that body feels and noticing the sensations in the body. So perhaps you might notice the meaning you make of those experiences or the emotions that are tied to them. Then we want to really absorb those feelings, like we're really hitting the save button on those experiences and felt sensations, just really allowing ourselves to savor that. And then lastly, if you feel comfortable, and this part is optional, you can let your mind wander to something that feels mildly negative. So we can notice that and we can remember it, but then we call upon these positive sensations, experiences, and emotions we just reflected upon to support that. And this helps rewire our brain away from that negative to also provide space for the positive. So with everything that I talked about today, the goal is to not feel good all the time. We are humans who are meant to experience the wide range of human emotions. We just want to focus on building a life that supports you even when you don't feel great. Like I mentioned, I wanted to talk about my 4-week workshop. So if this presentation was enough for you, you're feeling great, you don't have to listen to this part, but I wanted to at least share that I have a plan to do a longer workshop over the course of 4 weeks, and we'll continue to build upon PERMA. I will talk about strengths, flow, emotions, self-efficacy, optimism, savoring. So if you feel like you really want to go deeper into the topic of well-being and really learn some valuable tools, you can sign up for this. It's going to be, more structure, more practice, and more accountability because you're in a group setting. So if that works for you, I invite you to check out what it's all about. You can scan the QR code to link it to the Eventbrite, or you can also go on my website and under Wellness Workshops, there's information there. Thank you for listening.